just so that you're aware how we will be handling the meeting today is that we will reserve some time for questions and comments. We will actually be bringing up two topics today, and we will have designated times for questions and comments there. And excuse me, in the interim, if you could please add any additional comments that you're interested in making into the chat, that would be an appropriate step to take as well. So what the goal will be is to collect all of this information, all of the questions and comments, and afterward we will be posting a question and answer spot on our website so that you'll be able to get that information. And there will be a series of presenters here today. So we'll be jumping between members of the executive leadership team within Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services. So you'll be able to hear different components of what we're sharing based upon some different executive team members providing that information. Once again, everything, if you're jumping in just now, everything's going to be recorded and posted on the VR website. And we'll also be implementing a 3-minute time limit on each question and comment because we know that there may be a series of them and we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to get their comments and questions heard. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So the goal today is to provide information on some important changes that IVRS is proposing and to once again seek public comment about these. As always, we value public and staff comments, and we want to work hard to ensure that we have the appropriate mechanism to be able to record these so that we can take all of those into consideration. So the two items that we are going to be seeking public comment on today, first is to change the minimum qualifications for the rehabilitation counselor classification. So that job description and what we allow in terms of that minimum education and experience, as well as notifying the public of the statewide independent living council's selection of a new designated state entity for the funds for the independent living program. Okay, so we are going to get started on the first comment. Remember that, as I mentioned at the end of this first presentation, there will be the opportunity for individuals to share questions and comments at the designated time. Okay, so I want to provide a little bit of background information for you as to the why behind our decision. With the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, they did open up the regulatory guidance in the personnel standards section of the guidance that allows for VRs to move towards a bachelor's degree with a minimum of 1 year of experience for counselor positions. This was new from prior legislation, which really focused on the master's level for the counselor positions within vocational rehabilitation agencies. Simultaneously, throughout multiple conversations in different forums, vocational rehabilitation agencies have indicated a national struggle to receive the applications that they need for that master's level for counselors. So while it's valued and while they are seeking those individuals, it has become a bit of a difficult situation. And in Iowa, we are experiencing the same thing. In some areas, we do receive a good amount of master's level counselor applications. However, in other areas of the state, we receive very minimal to none. And that delays the process of having a fully staffed agency because if we cannot get a counselor, we may have to repost that position. So even when we've had efforts to connect with our institutes of higher education and identify innovative practices and ways that we can work with them on training, we are still experiencing what the national vocational rehabilitation experience has been, and that's a deficit in applications. So really the decision was made that we would like to follow the majority of other state agencies, state vocational rehabilitation agencies, and opening up that minimum qualification of the counselor position. This really does several things for us. One of them is, once again, it opens up the applicant pool for us. And it also leads to some capacity issues or some capacity for our current counselors, which we'll discuss on a later slide. So uh, in addition to all of that, VR has currently rehabilitation associate positions, and those are typically at the bachelor's level. However, the associates are very competent and able to do their job, but it does require the oversight of a counselor for areas that only a counselor can complete. So, for instance, our regulations only allow a counselor to complete eligibilities and our individualized plan for employment process. And so what that means is we're kind of doubling up in some areas with very competent staff, and it's in name only that they're unable to perform those duties. So we really want to correct that and free up that capacity. Okay, so with that, I am going to turn it over to Sandy Ostendorf, who will be talking about our current staffing numbers.
Thanks, Brandy. So the slide has a chart that shows the number of current counselors and associates that we have within our VR program now at this point. And so you can see that we have 15 associates, and that represents 13.2%. And then we have gosh, you can't see, 98 counselors, and that is 86.7% of that professional staff pool. And so, like Brandy said, there are certain things that an associate can't do within their job description. And so by gaining the capacity within those 15 positions to be able to expand that work, and then also simultaneously taking that those things that a counselor can't do off of a counselor that has to oversee that associate, you can just see, how that's going to increase the capacity that we will have to provide the VR work. And then the other reality of this is we've all encountered the not being able to fill positions. And when we can't fill positions, then the staff we have to absorb that work because the work doesn't go away, right? And so this move is really meant to just maximize our capacity within the rules that are allowed so that we can provide the best services possible to individuals with disabilities who seek out services from our agency.
Thanks, Sandy. So in terms of what those minimum qualifications look like, that is the area of the job description that we're looking at changing. And I apologize for the teeny wording on this. I don't expect you to read that. So essentially, really the difference is that we are moving from a more restrictive qualification that includes 24 hours of graduate coursework and counseling at the minimum. So in other words, you have to move into that master's level to a much easier process of exactly what those regulations allow. So what we are proposing is that we would go to a process that you are able to have an accredited four-year college or university and 1 year of that experience. So this is a decently big change, but once again, it is moving towards the expectations in the regulations or what it allows. So that's really what we're looking for in terms of public comment. I am going to turn it back over to Sandy to really talk about the training that we will provide for the associate positions that will be impacted by this change.
Thanks, Brandy. So yeah, as we looked at this change, right, it's just not changing a job title because we know that there is some training that is going to be needed for those folks that we have in the associate position. And so what we did was we reached out to April Stotz, our training resource manager, and we asked her to review basically those master's programs and the training that is specific to a VR counselor that is included within those master programs to say, okay, and then compare that to what does a typical bachelor's program look like and where might there be gaps in the knowledge that is needed to do the job of a rehab counselor. And so really it was April that came up with this list, and I'm just presenting this for her. So what she identified is basically 6 areas that she believes we really need to provide some training to our associates as they transition into a rehab counselor role. And that has to do with medical aspects and disability training, counseling theories and techniques, the ADA, eligibility training, plan development and comprehensive annual review training, and stabilization. And so we have asked April to start developing out some curriculum that she can use with this cohort to provide that training that they will need to be able to transition into the rehab counselor role. And the nice thing about doing this in-house is that she can then make this training unique also to our program, right? So she's not just training on the eligibility criteria that's within our regulations, but also she can use our form and talk about exactly how we do that within Iowa VR, so that the assistants or associates are going to get the appropriate training to be able to do this work within our agency, which is where they're employed, right? And so April's working on that, not only to develop out a training through this transition for that cohort, but also then to incorporate this into future new staff trainings, because as we hire individuals who have bachelor's degrees who may not have received this through their training programs, we want to make sure that from now and moving forward that they receive this type of training to be prepared to do the job of a VR counselor.
Thanks, Sandy. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Eric, one of our bureau chiefs for the Rehabilitation Services Bureau, to talk about the pay for that position.
All right, thanks, Brandy. This slide shows you the current counselor pay grade. This is pay grade 28. Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, the division of Iowa Workforce Development, really recognizes education and experience of rehab associates. And as they transition into the rehabilitation counselor positions, specifically for those promoted to rehabilitation counselor, the employee salary will be adjusted to the minimum of this pay grade that you're looking at, even if this results in a total increase exceeding 5%. If the increase happens to be less than 5%, the employee will receive a total of 5%. Employees who are already within the counselor salary range, they will see a 5% pay increase upon their promotion. IVRS also wants to recognize and reward those staff who have put in the extra effort to obtain their graduate level education. As a result, rehabilitation associates transitioning to the counselor positions with a bachelor's degree will be capped at 85% of the rehabilitation counselor maximum salary. This is still pending some final approvals, but that's what we're looking at this point. I think I'll pass it over to Mary next.
All right, thanks, Eric. So this is our approximate timeline that we have mapped out for these changes. So today, obviously, is our public meeting where we're notifying the public and accepting the public comments that Brandy had mentioned earlier. On October 29th, we do have a State Rehabilitation Council, or our SRC meeting. And this is really where we're presenting that information to the SRC, and we're going to be sharing the public comments and then the responses that are gathered based on that. For posting the counselor positions, then, for those that are currently associates, we will be completing the hiring process throughout November. And this does entail having to post for the position, going through an interview, and going through our hiring process for those positions. In December, then, that is when that will kick off that comprehensive training that Sandy had discussed on her slide, where we have a cohort of the associates that will be moving into those counselor positions will be trained comprehensively together moving forward over the next 6 months. So in June, we would anticipate that that training period would end, and that during that training period time, we would also have supervisors signing off on maybe some decisions that are made, such as eligibility and plan development, since those will be some of the new tasks that are added to the associates moving into this counselor role. And with that, I will pass it back over to Brandy.
Thanks, Mary. So this is really the end of that mini presentation that tells you kind of what our thoughts were. So what I want to do now is open it up for those questions and comments. So just a reminder for everyone, there is that 3-minute time limit to ensure that everyone has the ability to submit their questions, comments, concerns. We will be recording these. Once again, the The entire presentation will be recorded, but we will also be writing these down. So when you're speaking, just to ensure that we have everything that we need, if you could please begin with listing your name, and then you can either you can post in chat your email address or a phone number should you want to provide that information. What that does is that if there's specific information, that gives us the ability to reach out. But once again, as an overall, we will be posting the presentation, the recording, and a Q&A, and our responses included in that Q&A on the website. So once again, the last reminder here is that we will be receiving those questions and comments today. We will not be responding today to what those comments are, because we want to ensure that we are really being thoughtful in our approach. And if a decision that was made needs to change as a result of any of those, that we're able to do that and give you accurate information. So with that, I'm going to mute, and feel free to unmute if anyone has a question or a comment.
Hey, Brandy, this is Allison at the University of Iowa. I think you all know how to get in touch with me. My email is allison-levine@uiowa.edu. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to make comments here. I have two primary concerns related to this. Number one, how are you communicating to the current job candidates or future job candidates that the word counselor is actually going to reflect somebody that's not qualified to provide counseling services? As people are vulnerable when they're coming to receive services, and the word counselor is a very particular protected job category. So I'd be curious what you're doing to make sure that job candidates understand that the person is actually not a qualified counselor. And then second, how are you going to combat the research that shows that people without master's degrees in rehabilitation counseling have been demonstrated as having lower quality closures for people with the most significant disabilities, and that they are more likely to place people in lower quality jobs as compared to people who are master's level rehabilitation counselors. We've seen, since it has been 10 years since WIOA passed, we do quite have robust data that does show that the quality of closures are not the same. Thanks.
Hi, Brandy. This is Jenny Lyons with Disability Rights Iowa. My contact information is jlyons@driowa.org. And I have two questions pre-related. First, before making this change, was there a look into the current salary of a counselor and if that impacted individuals actually applying, especially if they were coming from a master's program? And the second question is, individuals who are currently a counselor who were hired under those essentially higher requirements, will they also see a salary adjustment considering they are now more qualified than the base qualifications? Thank you.
This is Diane Hernandez from Children and Families of Iowa. I think you guys know how to get a hold of me too. Diane h@cfiowa.org. My question is similar to the questions that have happened in the past, but like in addition to the things that are specific to rehabilitation when you're going through those master's programs, is that counseling background. And so what kind of protections are going to be put in place, for instance, if someone comes into the office with suicidal ideation and the person that they're working with doesn't have that counseling background? So just kind of putting a point on that I think everybody else is saying, just making sure that they're prepared to do the job that they're being asked to do and the things that can come up in that role.
Morning, this is Amy Dessenberg-Wines. You have my contact information. I have a couple of concerns. One is, or I guess it's a question for VR to think about, which is, how will you evaluate, much like Allison mentioned earlier, how will you evaluate the impact of this change that will be inclusive of SRC members and the greater public, not just within VR leadership, in seeing the impact of this decision, the impact on outcomes for job candidates. The other issue that I'm concerned about is really centered around expectation for quality employment for individuals with the most significant disabilities. And I think that's where additional experience, additional education, additional exposure. So if you change qualifications and might be hiring people who are relatively new to the field, excuse me, what efforts are going to be put in place beyond just some of the basic training that you mentioned? We see across the country consistent low expectations for folks with the most significant disabilities. So how will you ensure that those with less experience, less education will come into that role with high expectations for all job candidates? And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Erin Barnes, and I too, like Dr. Levine, am at the University of Iowa. One of the questions I have, and you have my contact information, has to do with a potential mass exodus of master's level providers. And so what are you doing to plan for a potential mass exodus once people learn that the amount of time, energy, and resources that they've invested into getting higher education to perform the function are essentially obsolete?
This is Katie Shaw, and I work for Voc Rehab. And I just want to make a comment that less education does not always mean less experience. I completely respect all the master's level individuals that have gone that extra mile to get that specified training. But and I work with some great counselors that have mentored me for 5 years at Voc Rehab, and I appreciate them. But I do want to add that, again, less education does not mean less experience. I, prior to coming to Voc Rehab, worked 11 years in community mental health, and have also some supervisory experience that I feel does bring quality services to Voc Rehab and our job candidates. Thank you.
Yvette, you're muted. We're not hearing you. No, still not hearing you.
Yvette, feel free to put your message into chat if you're unable to get your sound to not work, and we can make sure to get that recorded that way as well.
Well, I'm not sure the protocol here, so I'm just going to go ahead. I'm John Wadsworth, University of Iowa. I'm John S. Wadsworth at EDU. I think I have a number of concerns, but one of the concerns I'll raise is that it appears that Vocational Rehabilitation Services is going to offer essentially a mini master's program at the public expense to individuals who don't have that, whereas other individuals will have to pay for theirs. And that includes a private university here at the university in Iowa. So I'm kind of concerned about the vocational rehabilitation services essentially getting into the advanced education business for a very select group of people. And I'll end my comment there. Thanks.
Okay.
Eric, I just jumped in, so I think I'd go ahead.
Yep, feel free. There's no line. Feel free, anyone, to just unmute and ask your questions. Okay, I'm not hearing any others right now. So once again, for this topic, please feel free to continue to put your comments into chat, but I do want to ensure that we have time for the next topic. So we're going to keep moving with that. And this second topic is related to the State Independent Living Council selecting a new designated state entity. And we have invited our folks from the SILC to attend today. So they not only hear the comments, but we will also be, and I'll talk about this a little later as well, but we'll also be making sure that we get those comments to them too. So I'm going to go ahead with that topic. We also have Bob Hendrickson, who has previously served as our independent living resource manager. And I've asked him to do not hesitate to jump in and correct me if I am incorrect in this in these slides. So, I've given him full reign to jump in should I provide inaccurate information. But we wanted to start with just really what is the role of the designated state entity. And this information comes not only for the state plan, for independent living, but also in regulatory guidance. So the role of the designated state entity includes multiple components. The first one is that the designated state entity, or that state that's really designated as the entity to provide the funds, is really responsible for not only receiving those funds, but accounting for them and then dispersing them out. So it's really multiple fold in what that responsibility looks like. And the funds that are shared are based on what is included in the SPIL, or the state plan for independent living. The other requirement is to retain a certain percentage of funds that are received by the state under Part B. So that is that funding part. The other component is administrative support. The designated state entity does provide administrative support under Parts B and C. So there is that guidance and administrative information that is provided through the process. And finally, the other major kind of component of it is ensuring that they're maintaining the records and able to provide those records and assurances with respect to the programs, that are overseen. So, within this process, in terms of the designated state entity, what we have learned thus far is that the hope is to switch that designated state entity within the first half of the year, understanding that that can be a bit of a moving target.